As we read, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through Him, and apart from Him nothing came into being that has come into being. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. As we said in our last class, I'll summarize, unless you understand the height of the pre-existent glory of the Son, you cannot understand the depth of His incarnation and humiliation. To understand the one, it is necessary to comprehend something of the other. Also, there is a terrible malady in the sense that many people see the Son of God enter in, or almost as though He begins to exist when He enters into history 2,000 years ago in the incarnation. And that is so very, very wrong. Or they see Him as a secondary player in the Old Testament. Again, very, very wrong. We must see the eternal, pre-existent glory of the Son. Only then can we begin to understand the depth of His humiliation. And why do we want to understand the wide gap between the two? So that we can glory in Him. So that we can glory in Him. Remember, theology leads to doxology and praxis. Theology, a discourse on God, leads to doxology, worship, and praxis, practice. The way we live, the way we walk. Now, we are at the point now where we have done in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through Him, and apart from Him nothing came into being that has come into being. We'll start in verse 4. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. Now, I want to read something from David Clarkson. He explains that the Son is the great frontal principle of all life. Life finds its essential and original existence in Him. So much for the Son being a secondary player. So much for the Son entering on the scene 2,000 years ago. As there has always been the Father, there has always been the Son. And the Son has always been the frontal principle of life. All life. Everything that has to do with creation. I think according to the book of Colossians, it is correct to say that not only all things were created by Him, but all things were created in Him. In the sphere of Him. All things are about the Son. Now, the text does not say through Him, but in Him. Whatever life and light is found in God is found in the Word. Whatever life and light of God that is communicated to men has always and will always come through the Word. He is the source of life. And all life is communicated through Him. Through Him. Everything that anyone has ever known about God, they have known through the Son of God. He has always been mediator. But don't think of Him, this is very important here, don't think of Him as mediator, but think of Him also as source, along with the Father. Not simply a mediator. In Him. It doesn't say that life came through Him only, but it was in Him. Now, John's words find their Old Testament counterpart in Psalms 36:9. For with you is the fountain of life. In your light we see light. I've written here that it is remarkable that what the psalmist ascribes to God, the Apostle John ascribes to the Son. Everything that has ever lived and moved has done so by the grace of the Son of God. The elect and fallen angels, the elect and fallen among angels and demons, the most pious and most irreverent among men, owe their very existence to Him. In light of such truth, our reverence is rational, but rebellion is both arrogant and insane. Furthermore, it is an incomprehensible marvel that the fountain of all life would lay down His life for those who had none. Now, let's look at this for a moment. First of all, our reverence is rational. If there truly exists such a being as the Son of God, then our reverence and complete deliverance of self over to Him is quite rational. It is very rational. At the same time, rebellion against Him or merely ignoring Him is absolutely the most insane thing a creature could ever do. And this is what I want to show you your own insanity. My own insanity here. This is very important. Don't look at this as me talking about somebody in Hollywood. Look at yourself for a moment. The insanity. Young men here, you teenagers, how many thoughts of God do you have during the day? And how is your mind filled up with so many things that have nothing to do with God? My little boy Ian, he likes, I don't know, Legos, I guess is what they're called. And that's fine. But sometimes I sit down with him and I say, "You really like Legos?" "Yes, Dad." "You think a lot about Legos?" "Yes, Dad." Now, son, it's okay to like Legos and it's okay to think about Legos. But let's compare the quantity and quality of your thoughts with regard to Legos and with regard to God. Let's weigh them in a scale for a moment. We were doing some reading and looking out the window, and the leaves, of course, were changing. I said, "Son, look out the window and see that." He looked out the window, he saw that. I said, "Does that give you thoughts about God?" He said, "No." "Should it?" He began to weep. "Yes, it should." Now think about this. I'm not just speaking about the secular mind. We know that they are arrogant, that they are absolutely insane in their folly of not kissing the sun, of not submitting to the sun, of not bowing their knee to the sun. It's absolute insanity, suicidal insanity, the taking of one's own life. It's like being attached to a life support system and doing everything in your power to rip the plug out of the wall. But let's look at us. How hesitant we are to obey. How hesitant we are to give everything to Him. How hesitant we are to trust Him. Now, here I've written that the elect and fallen among angels and demons, the most pious and most irreverent among men, owe their very existence to Him. Isn't it amazing that the man or the woman who clenches his or her fists and shakes it in the face of God and screams out blasphemies, they only do so by the life that flows from the God they curse. The Antichrist, the many Antichrists that have been in this world, that have said horrible things against Him, they do so by the breath He gives them. Now, folks, if that's not insane, people have always asked me, they say, well, the devil's very wise, right? Well, he's clever. Well, if he knows who God is, I mean, he does. I mean, he's been there. And he knows his end is coming quickly. Why doesn't he just give up? Why doesn't he just fall on his face? Why doesn't he plead for mercy or something? Well, let me ask you a question.